Sco! Who let this filthy street rat onto my field? Look at you, dirty shoes, dirty clothes, dirty skin. You smell like the gutter you crawled out of. This is a place for champions, boy, not charity cases from the project. You think because they let you through the gate, you belong here? You never will. Your kind never does.
The boy didn't flinch. 12 years old, a cracked glove on his hand. He looked up at the billionaire and said, barely above a whisper, I'll win $100 million in 3 pitches. You won't touch one. Sullivan's laughter shook the bleachers. 6 weeks later, that laughter died. What did this boy know that a World Series champion didn't? 6 weeks before that moment, on the south side of Chicago, summer pressed down on the neighborhood like a hot hand on a wound. Fire hydrants hissing open for kids who couldn't afford pools. Bass rattling from a passing cutlass with a cracked taillight. Chain link fences rusted at the base, bent where someone had climbed over too many times. On the brick wall of a shuttered grocery store, someone had painted a mural of a black man in a baseball uniform mid-pitch. The paint was peeling. Nobody remembered who it was supposed to be. 3 miles east across the expressway, the glass towers of downtown caught the morning sun and threw it back like a dare. Wesley Irving was 12 years old, and he had never crossed that expressway. Every morning at 6, he sat on a milk crate outside Earl Dawson's batting cage, a rusted wreck wedged between a laundromat and the dead grocery store. Half-collapsed roof, cracked concrete floor, one flickering bulb. A hand-painted sign read, Dawson's Cage, open when I'm here. Earl Dawson was 68, built like a fire hydrant left out in the weather for 40 years. He came out carrying a bucket of baseballs so scuffed the stitching had gone gray, hung targets from the cage ceiling, a tin can, a tennis ball on a string, a cardboard circle no bigger than a fist, and nodded once. Wesley was oiling a glove, slowly like a prayer. The leather had turned nearly black, cracked in 3 places, restitched with a fishing line. 2 letters burned into the thumb, J.I. That glove never left his hand. Wesley threw. The tin can exploded off its wire like a gunshot. The tennis ball snapped off its string. The cardboard punched clean through. 3 throws, 3 kills. Kids walking past stopped at the fence. One whispered, "That ain't normal." Earl scribbled in a small notebook. Dates, velocities, accuracy percentages, grip notes. 4 years of data. Not a diary. A scouting grade development record more detailed than most pro organizations keep for top draft picks. At 6:45, Nina Irving appeared in hospital scrubs. Dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. Breakfast in a brown paper bag. She watched Wesley throw 5 pitches. Every one hit its target with a crack that didn't belong to a child's arm. Her eyes glistened. Pride and fear and a memory buried so deep it pressed against her ribs. She handed the bag through the fence, turned to Earl and said quietly, "Don't let him end up like his father." She left. Double shift, same as yesterday. That night, Earl sat alone in his office, a closet with a desk and a locked drawer. He opened it. Inside, a faded newspaper clipping. James Irving, the arm that could have changed everything. A photograph. A young black man in a professional uniform, mid-pitch. The same glove, the same initials. Earl whispered into the dark, "Not yet." 3 miles east, a different world was breathing. The Lakeshore Lions Youth Baseball Academy. 30,000 square feet of polished hardwood, indoor batting tunnels, pitching labs with biomechanical sensors. Annual registration, $5,000. Parking lot full of Escalades and Range Rovers. The trophy case stretched a hallway long, lit from behind like a museum. At the center of it all, Garrett Sullivan. In his office, walnut desk, World Series trophy photo framed behind him, he talked on the phone about brand alignment, optics, the right image. He said standards 3 times in 2 minutes. He never said talent once. 3-time All-Star, World Series MVP, career .310 hitter. He retired at 38, built a business empire, and came back to youth baseball because he needed to be needed. He ran the Lions with total control and absolute certainty that excellence was something you were born into, not something that wandered in off the street. His son Bryce, 13, practiced alone. Good mechanics, decent arm. Every pitch filmed, every session reviewed by a $200 an hour private coach. Bryce was good, not great. But he'd never needed to be great. Never thrown a rock at a chalk circle because he couldn't afford a ball. Never eaten breakfast from a paper bag on a milk crate at 6 a.m. because that was the only time his mother could see him. Bryce had everything Wesley didn't. Wesley had something Bryce would never understand. But that part comes later. Because right now, a single flyer taped to the laundromat window next to Earl's cage was about to set fire to both worlds. What was on that flyer, and why did Earl Dawson's hands shake when he read it? The flyer said, "Future Stars of Chicago, Open Showcase. All youth players are welcome. Lakeshore Lions Stadium, Saturday, 9 a.m. All youth players are welcome." Earl read that line 3 times. He knew what welcome meant in Lakeshore's language. It meant welcome if you look right, dress right, pay right. But the words were printed in black and white doesn't lie the same way people do. He brought the flyer to Wesley the next morning. The boy studied it the way he studied everything. Quiet, still, absorbing. Earl said, "You walk in there, you show them what you've got, and they can't pretend you don't exist. Your daddy never got his fair shot. You will." Wesley folded the flyer into his back pocket. He didn't smile. He nodded once, the same nod Earl gave him before every drill, the language of men who don't waste words. Saturday, Lakeshore Stadium. Wesley arrived alone. He took the bus, 45 minutes, 2 transfers, the smell of diesel and sweat still hanging in the air when he stepped off. He walked through the parking lot, past rows of black Escalades and white Range Rovers that gleamed like they'd never touched a road with potholes. A woman in a tennis skirt unloaded a gear bag bigger than Wesley's entire closet. Their son walked ahead in a pressed uniform with his name embroidered on the chest. Wesley wore a gray t-shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers with holes at the toes. He carried his father's glove and a backpack with a water bottle and a granola bar. Inside, the air changed. Pristine artificial turf glowing under halogen lights, digital scoreboards cycling sponsor logos, the smell of new leather and fresh laundered uniforms. Boys warmed up in matching gear. Parents filmed with cameras that cost more than Nina's monthly rent. Wesley found the registration table. A woman with a clipboard looked at his address, a South Side zip code, and her expression shifted. Not much, just enough. Registration fee is $200. Wesley didn't know. Earl didn't know. Nobody from their side of the expressway knew. He had $14 in his pocket. He stood frozen while families behind him moved forward with credit cards. A boy in line said to his father loud enough, "Is he lost?" Wesley started to speak. "Just let me throw just 3 pitches," when a voice cut across the field like a blade. "What the hell is this?" Garrett Sullivan walked toward the table. He moved like he owned the ground beneath him, because in this building, he did. His eyes found Wesley in 2 seconds, and what happened next didn't bother wearing a mask. Sullivan looked Wesley up and down. Sneakers, jeans, gray t-shirt, the old glove. The way you'd look at something stuck to the bottom of your shoe. "Who let you in here?" Wesley opened his mouth. Sullivan didn't let him speak. "No, seriously, who opened the door and thought this was acceptable?" He turned to the registration woman. "Is this a joke? Do we not have standards anymore? Do we just let anyone wander off the street now?" He stepped closer. Close enough that Wesley had to look up. "Look at you! You look like you slept in a dumpster. You smell like the bus. You're standing in a facility that costs more per square foot than whatever apartment your mama's renting, and you're holding a glove that belongs in a landfill." He flicked his fingers toward the glove. "What is that, your daddy's? Did he teach you to play in some alley between drug deals? The words landed like fists. Every parent within earshot heard them. Some looked away. None spoke up. Wesley's jaw tightened. His hand closed around the glove so hard his knuckles went pale. Sullivan wasn't done. Let me explain something to you, son. This program exists for athletes, real athletes, kids with real training, real coaches, real futures. Not every kid with a ball and a dream gets to walk in here and pretend he belongs. That's not how the world works, especially not for... He paused, smiled, let the silence fill in the word he didn't say. Your situation. Your situation. The two words hung in the air like smoke. Bryce Sullivan and two teammates had stopped warming up to watch. Bryce called out, grinning, "Nice glove, bro. Garage sale or dumpster?" The boys laughed. The sound bounced off the polished walls and came back louder. A security guard appeared at Wesley's side. "Come on, kid, let's go." Wesley didn't move. Not yet. Something was happening inside him, not breaking, igniting. Every insult Sullivan had thrown was fuel, and the fire had just found oxygen. He looked at the security guard's hand on his arm, then looked past him, directly at Sullivan, who was already turning away, already done, already erasing the boy from his mind. Wesley spoke. Not loud, not screaming, worse, calm. The kind of calm that makes powerful men stop walking. "I'll win $100 million in 3 pitches. Sullivan stopped, turned. The field went quiet. Wesley continued, steady as a heartbeat. "Put a bat in your hand, coach. I don't care that you're a World Series champion. 3 pitches. You won't touch one." For 2 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Sullivan laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, explosive, doubled-over roar. He looked at his coaching staff. "Did you hear that? $100 million. 3 pitches." He pointed at Wesley the way you'd point at a dog doing a trick. "The kid doesn't have $100, and he's talking about $100 million. The laughter spread. Coaches, parents, players. 100 people were laughing at a 12-year-old boy in a gray t-shirt who had just made the most ridiculous promise anyone in that building had ever heard. The security guard pulled Wesley toward the exit. Wesley didn't resist, but his face, jaw locked, eyes burning, glove pressed against his chest, was not the face of a boy who had been defeated. It was the face of a boy who had just set a timer on a bomb. High in the bleachers, a man in an expensive but understated jacket lowered his phone. He had filmed the entire thing. He wasn't laughing. His name was Victor Crane, and he was already making a call. Wesley sat on the bus home, forehead against the window, glove pressed to his chest. He didn't cry. He replayed Sullivan's words, every one, and whispered to himself so quiet only the glass could hear, 3 pitches. That night he sat at the kitchen table in an empty apartment, the glove laid flat in front of him, initials J.I. staring up like eyes. He picked up his phone and typed, "Garrett Sullivan MLB career stats." He read everything, and when he was done, he looked at the glove and said to the empty room, "Who are you? Who are you really?" The answer to that question would change his life. But the person who held it was not his mother. It was a 68-year-old man in a crumbling batting cage and a ghost with the same initials on his hand. What did Earl Dawson have locked in that drawer? And what was Victor Crane doing with that phone call? The apartment was quiet when Nina got home. Wesley was sitting at the kitchen table, the glove laid flat between them, initials up, like evidence in a trial. "Mama, whose glove is this?" Nina set her bag down. "Your grandfather's." "No, it wasn't." He turned the glove over, ran his finger along the stitching. Tight, professional, machine grade. "I looked it up. This is custom fitted. These stitches come from a factory that only makes gear for signed players." He looked at her. "Whose glove is this? Really?" Nina sat down. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the initials, J.I., and something behind her eyes collapsed. She told him everything. James Irving, his father, the most dominant left-handed pitcher to come out of Chicago's amateur circuit in a generation, scouted at 19, signed at 20, fastball clocked at 96, the kind of velocity that makes scouts call their bosses from the parking lot. They called him the next great arm. But James was loud. Not arrogant, honest. He saw black players paid less than white players with the same stats. Black coaches passed over from men with half their experience. Scouting reports called white pitchers cerebral and black pitchers athletic. The same code words, generation after generation. James spoke about it publicly, named names, cited numbers, made powerful people uncomfortable in rooms where comfort was the only currency. At 22, his contract was quietly terminated. No other team called. James Irving was blacklisted, not on paper, but in the silence between phone calls that never came. Within 2 years, warehouse nights. Within 5, the warehouse had eaten his shoulders, his knees, and the arm that was supposed to change everything. He died at 29. Heart failure, the certificate said. Nina knew better. The system broke his body. The silence broke the rest. Wesley was 3. He remembers nothing except warmth and the smell of leather. Nina whispered, "Your father didn't lose because he wasn't good enough. He lost because he was too good and too honest for a system that punishes both." Wesley sat with the glove, feeling cracked leather and fishing line stitches. This was not a glove. This was an unfinished sentence. The next morning he went to Earl. Earl didn't look surprised. He looked relieved, like a man finally putting down something he'd carried for 15 years. "I was his catcher. 3 seasons. Best arm I ever stood behind. When they cut him, I wrote letters, made calls. Nobody listened." He paused. "When you were 8, throwing rocks behind the laundromat, hitting the same spot every time, I saw him. I saw James." 4 years. Earl had built Wesley in secret. The notebook wasn't sentiment. It was architecture. Every velocity reading, every accuracy drill, every adjustment tracked with the precision of a man who knew exactly what he was constructing. Proof that could not be denied. Then Earl taught him something that made the room go still. "Your father invented a pitch, a changeup, modified grip, unorthodox release. Comes in looking like a fastball, same speed, same line. Then in the last 10 feet it drops. Not drifts, drops, like someone cut the strings." Earl called it the ghost. "You throw this pitch once, and you throw it last. Nobody sees it before it matters, understand?" Wesley nodded. That same week, a town car parked next to the laundromat. Out stepped Victor Crane, tailored jacket, no tie, the quiet confidence of a man who built a billion-dollar empire from a neighborhood just like this one. "I was at the showcase. I saw what Sullivan did to your boy, and I saw what your boy did back." He looked at Wesley. "You told that man $100 million, 3 pitches. Did you mean it?" "Every word." Crane studied him, not the way Sullivan had, measuring what Wesley lacked, but measuring what he was worth. "Then I'll put up the money. You put up the arm." The alliance was set. The fuse Wesley lit at the showcase now had dynamite attached. Sullivan didn't know that yet. By the time he found out, it would be too late. How do you force a billionaire World Series champion to accept a challenge from a 12-year-old boy he's already forgotten? The answer was simple. You don't force a man like Sullivan. You let his pride do it for you. Crane understood Sullivan the way a locksmith understands a lock, not by studying the metal, but by studying the mechanism. Sullivan's mechanism was ego. 18 years after retirement, every media appearance, every trophy case, every coaching clinic existed to reinforce one belief: I am still the greatest. Threaten that belief publicly, and Sullivan had no choice but to respond, because silence, to a man like him, was surrender. Crane sent the challenge through Sullivan's management team, formal, written. One public exhibition at a major Chicago stadium. Wesley pitches 3 balls to Sullivan. Strikeout. Sullivan pays $100 million. Sullivan connects on even 1. Crane pays $100 million. Live broadcast. Full media. Sullivan's lawyers responded in 4 hours. Mr. Sullivan declines. Crane was counting on it. The refusal was step 1. Step 2, he leaked the story. Not the proposal, the showcase footage. Someone had filmed Wesley's declaration on their phone. Crane made sure it surfaced. The video hit social media like gasoline on a spark. The headline wrote itself. Southside Kid challenges World Series MVP. I'll win $100 million in 3 pitches. Champion refuses. Refuses. That word did more damage than any pitch could. Within 24 hours, every sports blog, every talk show, every barbershop in Chicago was arguing. Within 48, it was national. The video, Wesley, 12 years old, gray t-shirt, holes in his shoes, staring down a billionaire, was shared 2 million times. The narrative split. One side called Wesley delusional, the other called Sullivan a coward punching down at a child. Underneath it all, the racial dimension burned like a wire nobody could cut. A wealthy white champion refusing to face a poor black boy from the South Side. Crane knew the optics. He'd grown up on those streets. He knew exactly what America sees when a powerful white man tells a black child to know his place. Sullivan's PR team released a statement. Mr. Sullivan has nothing to prove against a minor. But the internet doesn't read statements. It reads images. And the image, Sullivan laughing, pointing, a child dragged out by security, was worth more than any press release. Someone created hashtag 3pitches. It trended for 3 days. Sullivan's name was no longer World Series champion. It was the man afraid of a 12-year-old. On the 4th day, Sullivan called a press conference. He stood behind a podium flanked by trophies and delivered his response with controlled fury. Fine, I'll face this kid and his little sideshow. When it's over, I'll donate the $100 million to charity and teach him a lesson about knowing his place. Knowing his place. The phrase detonated. He meant authority. The world heard something much older and much uglier. Every retweet, every think piece, every dinner table argument for the next 3 weeks circled back to those 3 words. The event was set. 3 weeks out. Broadcast rights sold. Ticket sales crashed the website in 11 minutes. Back on the South Side, inside the crumbling cage, the real work began. Earl had 3 weeks to prepare Wesley for the most important 45 seconds of his life. He trained the boy with a ferocity that bordered on cruelty. Not because Earl was cruel, but because Sullivan was still Garrett Sullivan. 55 years old, but still training 4 days a week. Still had the hand speed and eye coordination that made him a legend. Underestimating him would be suicide. Earl studied Sullivan obsessively. Old MLB footage, charity game clips, the training videos Sullivan posted to intimidate Wesley. Hundreds of at-bats mapped, swing mechanics cataloged. The data pointed to one critical flaw. Sullivan committed early on off-speed pitches. His career strikeout numbers confirmed it. His hands were fast, but his discipline was emotional. When he decided to swing, he swung with everything. He couldn't hold back. Earl built a 3-pitch sequence like an architect builds a bridge, every piece load-bearing. Pitch 1, fastball. Establish speed in Sullivan's eyes. Force his brain to calibrate. Pitch 2, cutter. Same arm motion, but the ball breaks 3 inches laterally at the last moment. Shift Sullivan's eye level. Plant doubt. Pitch 3, the ghost. Same motion, same release. 9 miles per hour slower, with a vertical drop that defies geometry. By the time Sullivan's brain realizes it's not a fastball, his bat is already committed to empty air. Wesley drilled the sequence until it lived in his muscles. 50 fastballs a day, 30 cutters. And the ghost, never. Not once where a window was open or a phone could record. Earl was absolute. That pitch does not exist until the 3rd strike. It is a ghost. Ghosts only appear when it's time. The cost was brutal. Wesley's fingers split and bled. Nina bandaged them at 11 every night, hands gentle, eyes afraid. Ice bags lived on the kitchen table like furniture. His shoulder ached in ways a 12-year-old's shoulder should never ache. but he never stopped. 3 days before the event, Tom Callahan called Earl. The MLB scout had seen the firestorm. He knew whose son Wesley was. 15 years ago, he'd written generational talent in his notebook and watched the system destroy the man anyway. "The numbers you sent me," Callahan said, "they're real. This kid's velocity at 12 is what his father threw at 20. I'm coming." Earl hung up, sat in the dark, and for the first time in 15 years allowed himself to believe. The night before the event, Wesley sat on his bed, glove on the pillow. Nina in the doorway, still in scrubs. She didn't say when, she said, "Your father never got to throw his last pitch. Tomorrow, you throw it for him." Wesley pressed the glove against his chest. The leather was warm. The initials bit into his skin like a fingerprint from another life. Not grief, a promise. Tomorrow, 15,000 people would learn what those 2 letters meant. And one of them, the one holding the bat, would wish he had never laughed. What did the stadium look like when Wesley stepped onto that mound? And what was playing on the jumbotron that turned Garrett Sullivan's face white? The stadium looked like a cathedral built for war. A single mound and home plate sat center field, spotlit from above like a boxing ring. The rest is dark. 15,000 seats, sold out. Jumbotron screens pulsed with a countdown. 3 pitches! Camera crews from 4 national networks lined the baselines. Sullivan emerged first. Custom uniform, his old number 14 in gold on the back. Polished helmet. A bat engineered for his grip, his swing, his hands. He walked to the plate slow and deliberate, owning every inch of ground. The crowd erupted. He tipped his helmet, waved, and flashed the smile. The legend. The man who could not be beaten by a child. Then Wesley walked out, opposite tunnel, alone. Gray t-shirt, jeans, sneakers, father's glove on his left hand. No entourage. Earl behind the backstop by rule, Crane in his box seat. He walked to the mound quiet, unhurried, like a boy carrying something heavy that nobody else could see. The roar dropped to a murmur. He looked impossibly small, a child in a circle of white light, 60 feet and 6 inches from a man who had spent a lifetime destroying things thrown in his direction. Commentators filled the silence, recapped the story, the odds. Vegas had Sullivan at -850, a retired pitcher on the panel. The kid has heart, but Sullivan hit .310 against Major League pitching. A 12-year-old? I don't see it. Then the jumbotron changed. The countdown disappeared. Black screen. 2 seconds of silence, long enough for 15,000 people to stop breathing. Then a video began. It opened on the south side, cracked sidewalks, chain-link fences, the mural on the brick wall. Earl's cage, rusted roof, flickering bulb, Wesley throwing in the half-dark. Raw, intimate footage. Then the image shifted. A photograph filled the screen, enormous, sharp. A young black man in a professional uniform, mid-pitch, left arm extended. On his hand, a glove. The same glove, the same initials. A headline appeared, "James Irving, the arm that could have changed everything." 90 seconds. Who James Irving was, the scouting reports, the silencing, the blacklisting, the warehouse, death at 29. Then white text on black. His son, Wesley Irving, stands on this mound tonight, wearing his father's glove. The stadium reacted like a body reacts to shock. Silence first, then a sound that started low and built. Not cheering, not crying, somewhere between. 15,000 people processing the same revelation at once. Cameras found Nina, gripping the seat with both hands, tears streaming, jaw clenched so tight the tendons in her neck stood like cables. Cameras found Callahan in the front row. He removed his cap and held it against his chest. Cameras found Sullivan, standing at the plate, bat in hand, staring at the jumbotron. His face had changed. He knew the boy's first name. He didn't know the last name meant that. He didn't know the child he had mocked, humiliated, and dragged off his field was the son of James Irving, the man the system he thrived in had erased. He was staring at a ghost wearing a dead man's glove. His confidence didn't shatter. It cracked, a fracture running through the center of everything he believed about who deserved to stand on this field. In his box, Crane leaned forward. He had planned this reveal to the second, whispered to the empty chair beside him, "This one's for you, James." Behind the backstop, Earl opened his notebook to the last page. His own handwriting. 3 pitches. Make them count. He held it up so only Wesley could see. Wesley read it, nodded once. The umpire stepped forward. Silence so complete you could hear the stadium lights humming 60 feet above. Countdown. Pitch, 1 of 3. Wesley adjusted his father's glove, pressed the initials into his palm, set his feet on the rubber. 15,000 people held their breath. What happened next would be replayed 22 million times, and it started with a fastball that made a World Series champion swing at air. Wesley stood on the mound, 12 years old, 60 feet and 6 inches from a man who had hit baseballs thrown by the best arms on the planet for 15 seasons. 15,000 people in the seats, millions streaming. The air had weight, pressing against skin like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. He adjusted his father's glove. Cracked leather settled against his palm, initials biting into the skin between thumb and forefinger. Earl stood behind the backstop, arms folded, notebook closed. He gave Wesley a single nod, the nod that meant, throw. Sullivan settled into his stance, back foot dug in, bat cocked, hands loose, weight balanced, eyes locked on Wesley's release point. This was muscle memory. 15 years of professional hitting encoded in bone. His body knew how to hit a baseball the way most people know how to breathe. Wesley wound up. The motion was smooth, unnervingly smooth for a child. His arm came through in a single whip crack, and the ball left his hand. 60 feet and 6 inches in the time it takes a heart to beat once. Sullivan's eyes tracked it. His brain calculated. Every signal said fastball. Every calculation said, swing now. He swung. Late. The ball was already buried in the catcher's mitt with a crack that echoed like a rifle shot. Sullivan's bat cut through empty air. Strike 1. The jumbotron flashed. 71 miles per hour. 71 from a 12-year-old arm. From a youth mound, that translates to facing 95 plus from a regulation distance. The stadium gasped. 15,000 throats inhaling at once. A commentator said, "That can't be right," before catching himself. Sullivan stepped out. He didn't look at the crowd. He stared at the mound, and for the first time since the challenge was announced, the smirk was gone. Recalculation. The thing on that mound was not what he assumed. Nina sat in the stands, hands clasped, knuckles white as bone. Crane was motionless in his box, radiating intensity. Callahan wrote a single number in his notebook and underlined it twice. Earl's eyes closed briefly. He'd seen that pitch 10,000 times from this boy and once from his father. Sullivan stepped back in, adjusted his helmet, dug deeper. Countdown. Pitch, 2 of 3. Wesley knew what Sullivan would do. A hitter of that caliber doesn't get fooled twice by the same pitch. Sullivan's brain had calibrated to 71. His timing would adjust. Same fastball again and Sullivan would connect. So Wesley changed. The cutter. Same arm slot, same windup, same release point. Identical in every way a hitter's eyes can detect, until the last 3 inches, when the ball breaks laterally, sliding away from a right-handed bat like a door closing in his face. Wesley wound up. Same motion. Deliberately identical. Because the cutter's power is not in the pitch, it's in the lie it tells. It says, "This is the fastball you just saw. Trust your eyes. Commit." Sullivan trusted. He committed. His swing was violent, full torque, hips rotating, hands driving through the zone with the force that had sent 412 career home runs over outfield walls. The ball was cut, 3 inches outside. 3 inches doesn't sound like much. In baseball, 3 inches is the distance between a home run and humiliation. Sullivan's bat passed through the space where the ball should have been, but wasn't. The barrel missed by the width of a finger. Strike 2. Half the crowd was on its feet. This was no longer a spectacle. This was reckoning. Sullivan stood at the plate, bat extended, staring at the spot where the ball vanished. Then he stepped out and did something he hadn't done in 18 years. Bounced on his toes. A nervous habit from his playing days. The habit of a man no longer certain he was going to win. He looked at Wesley. No arrogance, no celebration. Stillness. The boy's expression hadn't changed since pitch 1. Calm, locked, untouchable. The same composure James Irving wore in every photograph. Sullivan was seeing a dead man's face on a living boy's body, and whether he understood it or not, it was dismantling him from the inside. Nina was standing, both hands over her mouth. Earl had tears on his cheeks, but his whisper was steel. "One more, baby. One more." Crane hadn't moved, fist clenched, carved from stone. Callahan had stopped writing. Sullivan stepped back in, dug his back foot deep enough to kick up dirt, choked up a half-inch on the bat. A concession. No longer swinging for power. Swinging for survival. Countdown. Pitch 3 of 3. The noise was deafening, then it vanished. As Wesley began his wind-up, 15,000 people stopped making sound at exactly the same moment. The silence was sudden, physical, sacred. This was the pitch Wesley had never thrown in public, the pitch his father invented, the pitch no one had thrown since James Irving was erased from the game. The modified changeup with the unorthodox grip that causes the ball to drop, not drift, not fade, drop, like gravity reaches up and yanks it from the air. The ghost. Wesley wound up. Same arm slot, same motion, same release. To Sullivan's eyes, this was the fastball. Every signal screamed, 71, straight, belt high. 15 years of professional muscle memory locked into a single decision. Swing now, swing hard, end this. He swung with everything, every ounce of World Series power left in his 55-year-old body. The ball left Wesley's hand at 62 miles per hour, 9 miles slower, an eternity in a hitter's timing. It traveled toward the plate on the same plane, same trajectory, same line. And then, in the last 10 feet, it dropped, as if the air opened a trap door beneath it. 18 inches straight down, falling beneath Sullivan's bat like the ground disappearing under a man's feet. Sullivan's swing cut through empty space at belt height. The ball arrived at knee height. 18 inches of nothing between them. The distance between everything Sullivan believed about himself and the truth. The ball thudded into the catcher's mitt, a soft leather pop that had no right to be the loudest thing 15,000 people had ever heard. Strike 3. 1 second of silence. One full, absolute second in which 15,000 people forgot how to make sound. Then the stadium detonated. Not a cheer, an explosion. A roar that started in the gut of the building and erupted outward like something held underwater too long. Screaming, crying, strangers grabbing strangers. Sullivan stood at the plate, bat hanging. He stared at the mound, at this boy in a gray t-shirt wearing a dead man's glove, and his face crumbled. Not anger, recognition. The recognition of a man who just learned, in front of the world, that the thing he dismissed was the thing that defeated him. Struck out by a ghost. Nina collapsed into her seat, sobbing from a place so deep it didn't have a name. 9 years of silence, 15 years of grief, a lifetime of watching the world ignore what her son carried, all breaking open at once. Earl dropped his notebook, both hands on the fence, head bowed, shoulders shaking. 15 years he had waited, pitch by pitch, day by day, in a rusted cage with scuffed baseballs and a stopwatch. Now it was here. Crane stood in his box, first raised, tears in his beard, silent. Callahan opened his notebook, wrote one word, closed it. Generational. Wesley hadn't moved, glove pressed against his chest. He looked up into the lights. The Jumbotron showed his face, calm, still, untouched by the chaos around him. His lips moved. One word. Too quiet for any microphone, too quiet for anyone except the man whose initials were pressed against his heart. Daddy. 3 pitches, 3 strikes, 1 ghost. But the aftermath of those 45 seconds would be louder than any stadium. And what Sullivan did next shocked everyone who thought they knew how this story ended. The crowd was still roaring when Crane descended from his box seat, walked across the field, and extended his hand to Wesley. Not the way an adult shakes a child's hand, but formally, firmly, as an equal. You just won $100 million, young man. What are you going to do with it? Wesley didn't pause, didn't think. The answer came out the way his pitches came out. Fast, clean, from somewhere deep. Fix my mama's car, and build Earl a new batting cage. The stadium heard it through the field microphones. The roar that followed shook the press box windows. Within an hour, that line would be screenshotted, clipped, shared 4 million times, and printed on t-shirts that hadn't been designed yet. Then Sullivan did something no one predicted. He removed his helmet, set the bat on the ground, and walked, slowly, heavily, like a man carrying the full weight of what had just happened to him, from home plate to the pitcher's mound. The stadium went quiet, not silent, breathless. 15,000 people watching a billionaire World Series champion walk toward a 12-year-old boy he had publicly humiliated 6 weeks earlier. Sullivan stopped in front of Wesley, extended his hand. His face was difficult to read, not broken but rearranged. Something behind his eyes had been taken apart and hadn't been put back together yet. He said, "Your father had the best arm I never got to face. Now I have." Not an apology, an admission. And from a man whose entire identity was built on never admitting anything, an admission was harder than any apology could ever be. Wesley shook his hand. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He looked Sullivan in the eye, the same eye he had looked into 6 weeks ago when the man laughed in his face and said, "You should have let me try out." 9 words. The simplest, most devastating sentence a child had ever spoken to a grown man. Sullivan absorbed them the way a body absorbs a blow it didn't see coming. He nodded once, turned, walked off the field. His son Bryce was waiting in the tunnel, looking at his father with eyes that would never see him the same way again. In the tunnel afterward, Callahan found Wesley, Nina, and Earl. He opened his leather notebook to a page dated 15 years ago. James Irving's scouting report, in Callahan's own handwriting. Generational talent. Below it, tonight's date and a new line. His son, same arm, same heart. The system will not fail this one. Wesley held up the glove. Nina placed her hand on it. Earl placed his hand on it. 3 hands on 1 glove. 3 generations of hope held together by cracked leather and fishing line. But what happened in the days that followed proved that 3 pitches could do more than win a bet. They could tear down a system. 48 hours. That's all it took for 3 pitches to rearrange the world. The video of The Ghost, Pitch 3, hit the internet like a bomb dropped from orbit. 22 million views in 2 days. Every sports network on the planet ran it. The slow-motion replay, the ball traveling straight, then dropping 18 inches like a trapdoor opening under Sullivan's bat, became the most shared sports clip of the year. People who had never watched a baseball game in their life were sharing it with captions like, "This kid," and "I've watched this 40 times and I still don't understand how the ball does that." Memes flooded every platform, remixes set to music, reaction videos from professional players who couldn't stop shaking their heads. A retired Hall of Fame pitcher watched the replay on live television, went silent for 5 seconds and said, "That's not a 12-year-old pitch. That's not even a major league pitch. That's something I've never seen before." The clip of him saying it was shared another 6 million times. Hashtag 3 pitches trended globally for a week. Wesley's face, calm, glove over heart, looking up into the lights, became an icon. Street artists painted it on walls in Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Someone made a mural on the same brick wall next to Earl's batting cage, right beside the peeling painting of the man in the baseball uniform that nobody used to remember. Now everybody remembered. Because the story didn't stop at the stadium. Journalists dug. They found the thread Crane had planted and pulled it until the whole fabric came apart. The James Irving story, buried for 15 years, exploded into national headlines. Former teammates who had stayed silent for a decade and a half suddenly found their voices. Internal memos surfaced from the organization that had released James. Emails discussing managing the optics of a difficult player whose only difficulty was telling the truth about how black athletes were treated. An ex-front office executive gave an anonymous interview confirming what Nina had known all along. James Irving was blacklisted, not for performance, for honesty. The narrative expanded beyond Wesley. This was no longer just a boy striking out a champion. This was a system exposed, a system that had destroyed a black man for speaking truth and then erased him so completely that his own son didn't know who he was until he was 12 years old. And the son answered in the only language that system respects: undeniable, public, inarguable excellence. Under enormous pressure, the MLB franchise issued a formal statement acknowledging James Irving's talent and expressing deep regret for the circumstances that prematurely ended his career. Not a full apology. Institutional language never goes that far. But it was the first time in 15 years that anyone in power had spoken James Irving's name out loud. Nina read the statement at the kitchen table, the glove between her hands. She said, to no one and to everyone, they finally said his name. Sullivan paid the $100 million, publicly as agreed. His reputation was no longer the champion who coaches kids. It was the champion who laughed at a kid and lost. He resigned from the Lakeshore Lions within the week. The $200 registration fee was eliminated the same day. A scholarship fund was established for youth players from underserved communities. The system Sullivan built to exclude was dismantled from inside its own walls. Crane announced the $100 million would be placed in a trust, the James Irving Foundation, dedicated to funding baseball programs in underserved communities across America. Wesley would be the foundation's first ambassador. At the press conference, Crane said one sentence that made every headline. This money was never mine. It was always James Irving's. His son just collected it. Wesley was invited to the National Youth Baseball Elite Development Program, the top feeder system for future MLB talent. He accepted. On his first day, he arrived carrying 2 things: a new equipment bag from Crane and his father's glove. Earl closed the batting cage for the last time, donated every piece of equipment to a community center 3 blocks away. On his way out, he taped 2 photographs to the wall by the entrance. Left, James Irving and Earl Dawson, young, grinning, wearing minor league uniforms, arms over each other's shoulders. Right, Wesley Irving on the mound at the challenge, mid-pitch, glove on his hand, face calm as still water. 2 photos, 2 generations, 1 unbroken line. And one last thing. Small, quiet, almost missed. Bryce Sullivan sent Wesley a message through the league's system. It read, "That pitch was unreal. If you ever need a batting partner, I'm around." Wesley wrote back one word: deal. The son was not the father, and sometimes that's where redemption begins. But this story has one more thing to say, and it's not about baseball. Wesley Irving did not win $100 million because he was angry. Anger doesn't strike out a World Series champion. Anger doesn't throw a pitch that drops 18 inches in 10 feet. Anger doesn't stand on a mound in front of 15,000 people and whisper a dead man's name into the lights. Preparation did that. Love did that. A man named Earl Dawson, 68 years old, bad knees, A batting cage held together with rust and stubbornness, spent 4 years building something in secret. Not a player, a promise. Every morning at 6, every scuffed baseball, every number written in that notebook was a brick in a house that the world didn't know was being built. He did it because he loved a man named James Irving, and because he saw that man's arm reborn in a boy who ate breakfast on a milk crate. A woman named Nina Irving worked double shifts, nights at Mercy General, days at a clinic on Roosevelt, so her son could have 1 free hour every morning to throw. She never told him to win. She told him to finish what his father started. That is a different kind of love. The kind that doesn't protect you from the fire. The kind that teaches you how to walk through it. A man named Victor Crane heard a 12-year-old make an impossible promise in a room full of laughter, and instead of laughing, he listened. He recognized the one thing money cannot buy and arrogance cannot fake: conviction. He bet $100 million on a boy's word, not because the odds were good, but because some things are worth more than odds. And a glove, cracked, oil-stained, held together with a fishing line, carried the memory of a father who was too good and too honest for a world that wasn't ready for him. James Irving never got his last pitch. His son threw it for him. And somewhere in the impossible drop of a ball called the Ghost, a man who had been silenced for 15 years finally spoke. 3 pitches. That's all it took to break the silence, to say a name the system erased, to prove that excellence doesn't ask permission, not from your zip code, not from your bank account, not from the color of your skin. Wesley Irving stood on a mound in a gray t-shirt and told a World Series champion,